Have you ever finished saying something and immediately thought, why did that sound so much better in my head? You knew what you wanted to say. You understood the idea. But somehow, when the words came out, they felt rushed, messy, quiet, or confusing. And then someone says, sorry, what did you say? That tiny sentence can hit harder than it should, because suddenly you're not just repeating yourself. You're questioning yourself. Do I sound nervous? Am I bad at speaking? Maybe I'm just not good with words. But what if the problem was never your intelligence? What if you simply never learned how to control the way your thoughts leave your mouth? Because clear speaking is not something you are either born with or without. It is a skill, and like every skill, it can be trained. I wish I understood that sooner. I used to think articulate people were just naturally articulate. They had the right vocabulary, the right confidence, the right voice. I thought some people were simply born with this mysterious ability to walk into a conversation and make every sentence sound effortless. But the more I studied communication, the more I realized something fascinating. Clear speakers are not necessarily people who have more to say. They are people who know how to make what they say easier to understand. And today, I want to give you 9 habits that can completely change the way you speak. But here's the interesting part. The first few habits have almost nothing to do with vocabulary. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes you may be making happens before you even say your first word. The first habit is simple: slow down your thoughts before you slow down your speech. Most people try to speak clearly by focusing on their mouth. They think, I need to pronounce my words better. But clarity begins much earlier. It begins in your mind. Think about what happens when someone asks you a question you weren't expecting. Your brain starts running. You have 5 possible answers, then 10. You're trying to sound intelligent. You're trying not to pause. You're trying to remember an example. And while all of that is happening, your mouth is already speaking. That's when sentences become tangled. You start with one idea, change direction halfway through, add another thought, forget the original point, and suddenly you're 6 sentences deep and wondering where you were going. So try this. Before answering an important question, give yourself 1 second. Just 1 second. Breathe. Ask yourself, what is the one thing I actually want them to understand? Then speak. That tiny pause feels enormous to you. But to the other person, it usually sounds like confidence. Why? Because confident people don't look terrified of silence. They understand that a pause is not a failure in communication. A pause is punctuation. Think about a powerful speaker. They don't throw every word at you like they're trying to catch a departing train. They give ideas room to land. So the next time someone asks you something important, don't rush to prove that you have an answer. Take a breath. Find the point, then speak. And that leads to the second habit: speak in thoughts, not sentences. This one changed everything for me. Instead of thinking, what sentence should I say next? Think, what idea am I trying to communicate? Because when you focus on sentences, you become obsessed with sounding good. When you focus on ideas, you become focused on being understood. Imagine you're explaining how to get somewhere. You don't memorize a speech before telling your friend which road to take. You simply know the destination, then you explain the route. Communication works the same way. Know your destination before you start driving. If someone asks, why did you leave your job? You don't need to immediately tell them every detail of the last 2 years. Start with the point. I realized I wanted work that gave me more freedom. Now the listener has a map. Everything else you say has somewhere to go. This is one of the simplest ways to sound more articulate without learning a single impressive word. Know your point, then support your point, then stop. And notice that last part, then stop. Because the third habit is learning to finish your sentence. A lot of people destroy their own clarity by continuing after the point has already landed. You say something powerful, the person understands, and then you think, maybe I should explain that more. So you add another sentence, then another. Then you weaken your original idea. It's like telling someone, this is the best restaurant in town. They say, really? And you respond, yeah, I mean, not necessarily the best, but it's pretty good. And there are probably other places, and I don't know, I just really like it. You had confidence in the first sentence. Then you talked yourself out of it. So practice finishing. Make your point. Pause. Let the other person respond. You don't have to fill every empty space. And if you're worried that people will think you're awkward because you paused, remember this: people are usually much less focused on your pauses than you are. They're listening to your message. You are listening to yourself. That's a huge difference. Now, the fourth habit is one that most people completely ignore: pronounce the ends of your words. You don't need a dramatic voice. You don't need to sound like a news anchor, but you do need to finish your words. When people speak quickly, they often swallow the final sounds. Gonna, wanna, did ya, or probably. And casual speech is completely normal. The problem comes when your listener has to work to decode you. Clear speaking is partly an act of generosity. You're making the listener's job easier. So practice finishing the final consonants of important words, especially when you're speaking in meetings, presentations, interviews, or serious conversations. Don't attack the words, complete them. There's a subtle difference, and once you become aware of it, you'll start hearing it everywhere. But here's where things get really interesting, because even if you slow down, organize your thoughts, finish your words, and pause confidently, you can still sound unclear. Why? Because of habit number 5, stop speaking on autopilot. Have you ever driven somewhere and realized you barely remember the journey? You arrived, but your mind was somewhere else. Speech can work the same way. You have phrases you repeat without thinking.
Like here.
You know, basically.
Auto.
Honestly, kind of, maybe, just. These words aren't evil. The problem is using them because your brain needs somewhere to hide while it figures out what to say. So for one day, try something unusual. Don't try to eliminate every filler word. Just notice them. Become curious. Every time you say don't judge yourself. Notice it. Every time you say when you don't need it, notice it. Awareness comes before change. And once you notice your filler words, replace them with silence. That is the upgrade. Instead of saying, I think the main reason is, you say nothing for a second. Then say, the main reason is. Silence gives your brain time to catch up with your mouth. And suddenly, you sound more deliberate. Which brings us to habit number 6. Use shorter sentences when the idea is important. We often believe complicated language makes us sound intelligent. It doesn't. Clarity makes you sound intelligent. Imagine two people explaining the same idea. One says, the fundamental issue we're experiencing is essentially related to the fact that there are several interconnected variables that are contributing to the overall situation. The other says, the problem has 3 causes. Which person would you rather listen to? Exactly. Simple language is not childish language. Simple language is controlled language. If you can take a complicated idea and explain it simply, you probably understand it deeply. So when you're speaking, ask yourself, can I say this in fewer words? Not because every sentence needs to be tiny, but because every unnecessary word creates another opportunity for confusion. Say what you mean. Then move. And now we reach habit number 7, which might be the most powerful one of all. Emphasize meaning, not volume. A lot of people think speaking with authority means speaking louder. It doesn't. Authority comes from contrast. Some words should matter more than others. If every word has the same energy, nothing stands out. Think about a sentence like, I really want you to remember this. You could say every word with exactly the same emphasis. Or you could make remember, carry the weight. I really want you to remember this. Suddenly, the sentence has direction. Your voice has meaning, so don't just ask, what words am I saying? Ask, which word matters most? Then let your voice show it. Sometimes that means getting slightly louder. Sometimes it means getting softer. Sometimes it means slowing down. Sometimes it means pausing before the important word. Your voice is not just a delivery system for your thoughts. Your voice is part of the meaning. And once you understand that, conversations become much more powerful. But there's another habit that completely transformed the way I think about speaking. Habit number 8, stop trying to sound impressive. This might sound strange coming from a video about becoming a better speaker, but listen carefully. The moment you start thinking, how do I sound right now? You stop fully listening. You're watching yourself from the outside. You're monitoring your vocabulary. You're judging your voice. You're wondering whether the other person thinks you're smart. And now half your brain is performing while the other half is communicating. That's exhausting. Instead, shift your attention outward. Ask yourself, what does this person need from me? What's the clearest way I can explain this? What are they actually asking? That shift takes you from performance to connection. And people can feel the difference. Have you ever spoken to someone who clearly wanted to impress you? They use big words, they interrupt, they tell you how knowledgeable they are, and yet, after 5 minutes, you don't feel connected to them at all. Now think about someone who made you feel heard. Someone who looked at you, someone who wasn't rushing, someone who understood your question before answering. You probably remember that person. That's because great communication isn't about making people notice you. It's about making people feel understood. And that leads to the final habit. Habit number 9, practice speaking when nobody is watching. Most people only practice communication when communication matters. An interview, a presentation, a difficult conversation, a date, a meeting, and then they wonder why they feel nervous. You wouldn't wait until marathon day to put on running shoes. So don't wait for an important conversation to train your speaking. Give yourself 5 minutes a day. Pick a random topic. Explain it out loud. What did you learn today? Why do you like your favorite movie? What makes a good friend? Why is your current goal important to you? Don't write a script. Don't memorize, just speak. And here's the important part. Record yourself occasionally. Not because you need to criticize everything. Listen for one thing. Maybe you're rushing. Maybe you're quiet. Maybe you're using too many fillers. Maybe you don't finish your sentences. Pick one habit, work on that habit for a week, then choose another. This is how you build speaking ability, not by trying to become a completely different person overnight, but by making tiny adjustments until clear communication becomes your default. And here's the beautiful thing. The more clearly you speak, the more clearly you think. Because speaking is not just the output of your thoughts. It trains your thoughts. When you learn to organize your words, you begin organizing your ideas. When you learn to pause, you begin giving your mind space. When you stop using unnecessary words, you begin noticing unnecessary thoughts. And eventually, something changes. You walk into conversations with less fear. You stop rehearsing every sentence in your head. You stop worrying about whether you're sounding smart. You simply know what you want to say, and you say it. That's confidence, not having the perfect voice, not knowing every impressive word, not never stumbling. Real confidence is trusting yourself enough to communicate imperfectly, So if you remember nothing else from this, remember this: clear speaking isn't about adding more. It's about removing what gets in the way. Slow your thoughts. Know your point. Finish your sentences. Complete your words. Notice your simpler language. Give important words more weight. Stop performing for approval. And practice when nobody is watching. You don't need to become the loudest person in the room. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to become easier to understand. Because when your thoughts are clear, your words become clearer. When your words become clearer, people understand you faster. And when people understand you, you stop feeling like you have to fight for their attention. So the next time you're about to speak, don't ask yourself, how can I sound impressive? Ask a better question. How can I make this easy to understand? That one question can change the way you speak, and eventually it can change the way you see yourself, because there is a version of you who doesn't mumble through ideas, doesn't rush through sentences, doesn't apologize for every opinion, and doesn't spend every conversation wondering whether you're good enough. That version of you isn't someone you have to become. It's someone you can practice becoming. One pause, one clear sentence, one conversation at a time.